Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast. My name is Toni and I'm the trauma doula, and I'm here to support you in learning and growing about childhood trauma, breaking generational cycles, and energy work. All things energy work. And in today's episode, I really wanted to talk to you about why you stay too long in bad relationships, friendships, jobs. Okay. So there's this thing that happens with survivors, and it often comes out in our relationships, in the relationships you hold with other people, whether romantically, whether it's friendships and career and jobs and coworkers. And I've found that people who have had childhood trauma tend to stay for too dang long in really bad situations and situationships. Anyhow, if you are returning, thank you for being here. And if you're new, welcome. I'm so happy to have you here. In the description box below is my Substack newsletter where I put all the extras from the podcast, and it is completely free to sign up. The paid version has extra bonus podcast episodes. So if you're interested in that, again, it's in the description box below. Thank you so much for your support, and let's get back into it. So why do you stay too long? Why do you stay too long? There's probably at least one thing, if you clicked on this episode, that you have been holding on to or staying in that you know is not good for you. You know that that person isn't treating you right, or maybe they're just downright mean to you. And yet you may be holding out hope that they'll change, that something will change fundamentally in this person, or that in some way you can do something to make things better. And yet you've been there too long and things still aren't better, and they may be getting worse. Now, I don't totally buy the whole point of attraction and you're attracting these things, blah, blah, blah. But I do believe that because of porous boundaries, childhood trauma survivors tend to allow certain energy into their lives. And this isn't necessarily on purpose, obviously. Again, I always say every trauma reaction is a natural and normal response to things that should have never happened. So there's never blame on the trauma reaction, even if it has to shift, even if we need to change it, even if we need to make that different and support ourselves on the way to doing that. There's never any blame about the reaction, because it probably kept you safe. And it's really important to recognize that. Oftentimes I feel like survivors start to really blame themselves, especially if the trauma happened in childhood. They really start to hammer in on blaming themselves, and that just turns into this guilt shame spiral. That if that was going to be helpful, it would have been helpful already, but it's not. So you're here. It's not helpful. So give yourself some grace as we talk about these topics and things like that. And as you learn about yourself as a survivor, give yourself some grace, give yourself some compassion. I find that compassion is the best healing balm and will take you a lot further than anything. But anyhow, first things first, one of the reasons why you tend to stay too long in bad friendships, bad relationships, taking a bad boss and allowing that bad boss to continue being a bad boss while not going to HR and not documenting and all these things, is because of our porous boundaries as trauma survivors. And when I say that, I mean oftentimes in childhood, your boundaries were not honored or not respected and weren't built, because boundaries are built. Some of our boundaries are natural, like some kids are huggers and some kids have never been huggers. Some kids, temperament wise, want a certain amount of physical touch from their parents or caregivers, and some kids don't want that. Some kids need and want words of affirmation and need to receive help and with physical things of playing with the toys and things like that, while other kids are like, don't help me, don't touch my toy, I know I'm doing fine, like I'd rather you do something else. And it's very normal. We all have different temperaments from the very beginning. We all have very different temperaments as children into adulthood. But something that does get built day by day, interaction by interaction, as we grow up, is our boundaries. So, and we're having a lot of conversations about this in my generation, which I'm a millennial, whatever. And the conversation is about, my kid doesn't need to hug that relative if they don't feel comfortable. My kid doesn't need to give that relative a kiss on the cheek or whatever. And if my kid doesn't want to be touched, you don't have a right to touch them or hug them and all these things because they said no. I saw this one TikTok of this dad who, he would ask his daughter for a hug or something like that. And the daughter would be like, no. And it seemed like it started to get to him. If you've seen the TikTok, it was really cute. But he was like, asked the daughter, he's like, are we okay? Because like, you never want a hug from me. You never, and like, did I do something? Like, are you okay? And the daughter said, you're the only man that will listen to me when I say I don't want to be touched. And the boys at school, they're still going to grab on my hair or poke me or like whatever, and they don't take me seriously. And the dad was just like, whoa, like, I'm glad I get to be that safe space. And what's going on at school, right? Like, I'm glad I get to be safe. I'm glad I'm safe for my kid. And so, kind of let that wash over you of what that means, of what that daughter gets in her home. She gets to feel safe. She gets to feel like she has autonomy. She gets to feel like, I can always come to my dad and tell them anything and they're not going to blame me for that. And so that recognition that if you didn't have that growing up, what you are going to be like is totally different. What you're going to accept from other people is totally different. And being able to see a healthy parent-child relationship when it comes to boundaries, because some people believe that children don't have boundaries and they shouldn't have boundaries and they're not people. And then they grow up and they wonder why their kids are pushovers or let people or whatever. People expect children to grow up and then be different than what they raised them as, which I find very interesting. Or they're surprised when they're going the opposite direction of what they were raised as, which is another trauma reaction. But all that is to say is, even when you did have boundaries, you were made to feel comfortable and more comfortable every time your boundary got pushed. And then you were made to feel bad if you got angry about your boundary being crossed. And you were made to feel bad about saying no to certain things. This is expected of you. This is family. We're family. That's a really big one when it comes to boundaries being pushed and crossed. And this doesn't even cover boundaries of physical safety within family. If the abuse was ratcheted to a whole different level, right? So a lot of times that bad boss, that bad significant other, that friend who just uses you as their therapist, it doesn't even seem that bad because it wasn't as bad as what you had growing up. Or maybe your, friend that uses you as a therapist, you're like, well, I can't even talk to my parents, so maybe they can't talk to you. And you want to be there for people and things like that. And so it really starts to build this sense of what will happen if I say no. Again, especially if there was a whole different level of abuse growing up. And so again, I always say, it's not your fault how you're reacting, but it is your responsibility to start to look around and recognize, hey, maybe this isn't okay. And that is a slow, soft, and steady journey. That is not something you jump into head first and hope for the best, okay? Because every action has an equal and opposite reaction. And so if suddenly you see something and you jump in, you're going to have the reaction, the snapback of regression. Okay. Specifically healing crises, if you've heard of those, that can often happen if you jump too fast, too soon, and then re-traumatize yourself. So take your time when you're starting to notice, like, maybe this friendship isn't equal, and maybe it's never been equal. Or maybe the significant other doesn't really even like me. They just like what I do for them. Maybe this job is tearing my mental health apart and my boss is abusive. Maybe I should start to try to find another job or some other opportunities because this isn't working for me. I'm not doing well here. And it's okay to recognize that and start to make steps to shift that. But that is one of the reasons why you stay too long, is because your boundaries have been pushed, and then your natural, normal response to be angry about your boundary being crossed is also pushed. So then maybe you're not even angry anymore. Maybe you just become apathetic to people mistreating you because you were told you couldn't be angry either. Which, if you know, anger is a natural, normal response to your boundaries being crossed. You should be angry, okay? Sometimes it's a way to protect yourself when someone is crossing your boundaries, okay? It can be really helpful and useful, especially when you have people who listen to you about your boundaries. Then you don't have to get angry. You can just state them, right? And so many of us don't have that experience. So I want to say that so many of us don't have the experience where we can say, this is my boundary. This is, this is what I'm willing to accept. This is how I want to be treated. And many of us may have experiences where people manipulated and used our boundaries against us. And so you may not have had the experience of being able to simply state your boundaries and simply be respected, which seems like, duh, of course that should happen. Like, there's no reason or world in which that should not happen. And yet it happens all the time, because I think narcissism is highly rewarded in our society right now. And so kindness is put on the back burner. If you notice, like, the kindest person you ever met is probably not highly rewarded for their kindness. And the most narcissistic whatever is probably doing pretty okay, somehow. But that's a societal thing. And as we create community and things like that, that is something that we should be looking into and moving forward with, is like creating communities where kindness thrives and grows and is rewarded. And if that's a community you want to create, great. Like, get out there, start connecting with other kind people so that we can have more kind communities. Anyway, now another reason why you might be staying too long in situations, friendships, relationships, jobs that are bad for you, that are abusive, that don't serve you, is because there is sometimes the subconscious belief that change equals trauma, that change is bad, change is scary, but change equals trauma. Because maybe you've never known good change, or even if you have known good change, maybe it kind of flew under the radar because nothing bad happened during that change. But this might be something that you notice, like if you're moving or things like that, or you're having just like a big life change, that there's this growing sense of anxiety and like, I can't breathe and all those things when you are going through that change. And that is a telltale sign that your body and your spirit still believe that change equals trauma, change is bad, and bad things will happen because somewhere in the past, change was bad. Change was real bad. It didn't mean anything good, and maybe good things didn't come from it. And especially as a kid, change is big, we crave certainty, stability, calm, safety, equilibrium. We crave those things. Our natural tendency is to go towards that state of equilibrium day in and day out. that balance. And it's normal and it's necessary. But if you're a survivor of childhood trauma, you probably want to make some changes. There are probably some things that don't serve you in your life, that don't serve the life you want to build. Maybe you haven't been able to build the life that you want to build because change is so scary and causes so much anxiety and so much tension. There's such a block energetically around changing that discomfort is preferable. I'm going to say that again. Sometimes change is so scary that the discomfort of staying the same is preferable. And you could be saying like, what, I really do want to change. And you probably do really want to change. That is never the thing is, oftentimes we do want to change. Like, I need to change this. I want to change this. This isn't good for me. I need to end this. This isn't good for me. This person doesn't respect me. They don't even see me, but that would mean changing. That would mean facing the intensity and going through the eye of that needle and doing some really hard things and making really hard decisions. And so often the discomfort of staying the same is preferable to the discomfort of change. And only when those things start to swap do you seek out help. That's oftentimes when people seek me out. They're like, I need help. Like, I gotta do something. Oftentimes they'll say, this is why I called you. Like, because the discomfort of staying the same became so great that the discomfort of the change, the anxiety, the ramp up was easier. And so sometimes that first step is just to recognize, like, maybe I'm comfortable here in this not changing situation, in this equilibrium. And okay, I'm comfortable. Do I want to do something about this? Or maybe I'm not anymore. Or maybe they're starting to even out. But either way, that is another reason why you might stay in situations that don't serve you, that don't amplify the person you want to become. And again, I feel like oftentimes when we get into the nitty gritty, we get underneath and we say, you're comfortable here. That's why you haven't changed. Or the anxiety of change is so uncomfortable that you don't want to go in that direction. Your whole body is like, no, okay. And all that. There's always that element of the inner critic that's going to come in and try to berate you for this. And every human's like this, whether it's like, a diabetic not doing sugar-free or having a sugar-free lifestyle because it's uncomfortable. Sugar's great. It tastes good. It makes your brain happy. It releases dopamine and all these other things that make you go, right? So of course you don't want to give up sugar. It's still not good for you. It doesn't help you in any way. And if you're a diabetic, it will harm you greatly in many ways, right? And so I would think about it like that. It's just sugar. And, I want to go towards the sugar, even if it's not good for me, even if I know that this can harm me and this continues to harm me. And recognize that it's also possible to give up sugar. It's possible to change. And the effort that you have to put into that, it's going to be effort. It's going to be work. It's not going to be easy, but you can do it. I believe in you. Anyway, if you like what you hear, like, subscribe, share this episode, and sign up for my Substack in the description box below. See y'all. Bye.